This week is the start of Ramadan, the holy month for Muslim employees. Now, when I make a video about that, some of the first comments I get are, where's the care for other religions? And keep religion out of work entirely. In this video, I'll talk about why things like religion and customs can matter, especially as a manager, and what to keep in mind at work. Now, Ramadan in particular, a lot may not know about that if you don't celebrate it. But that includes fasting from morning until night, including no food, no water. So you may have employees who are waking up at 4 a.m. to eat before daybreak and getting home to have a break the fast meal for their family. And this is a really core religious practice for them. Now, how that integrates with work often can mean if you have working hours, you may need to try to adjust those for the month, or thinking about how you come to work, and that especially at the beginning this week may be a hard adjustment. You may have other employees that do not fast. People may not do it if they're pregnant, nursing, sick. So what can happen is, one, a feeling of coming to work and feeling like you can't talk about it and that you just have to be your normal self when you feel like anything but. Or you may have employees that aren't taking part in the practice and they're getting questions about, wait, why aren't you? And so these type of things for Muslim employees can be felt by employees of other religions or other local customs. And so why does this matter at work, and why can't you just ignore it completely? Well, two reasons. One is sometimes you have to. In the US in particular, there are laws, including federal laws, about religious accommodations, and that at some organizations, depending on the employer size, that you have an obligation to enter into discussions, interactive discussions, about potential religious accommodations. Now, I won't get into that because I'm certainly not going to be talking about legal advice, but it is important to know that at times part of the reason it matters is that you have, just like medical accommodations or disability accommodations, you can also have religious accommodations where organizations are required to have reasonable accommodations. And that's where your HR and lawyers are really helpful and needed in that, but to understand why it happens. The other is really that human lens. And when I see comments that will say, like, religion should have no part at work, the problem that I have with that is that assumes or pretends like people, when they come in, punch the time clock, log in, start their shift, go online, show up at work, that you aren't checking your humanity when you come in. And people at all times bring whoever they are into work. So whatever you're going through, if you have some of those religious practices or customs, you may be bringing those into work. Just like when you leave work, you're often bringing those good feelings if something good happened, or those bad feelings, that stress if you're going through a stressful time. And so this thought that people can completely separate their lives in and outside of work just isn't realistic. But also, there's plenty of data, research, articles about loneliness and isolation at work. And part of that I do think comes from the feeling that when people come, they feel like they're expected, to be this certain robot persona and ignore everything. On the flip side, it doesn't mean that in a work environment that managers should be going around asking people their religion or asking their customs or things like that and asking specific personal questions. And so it's absolutely a fine balance. But as a manager, when an employee has shared with you, like, I am Muslim, sometimes it's having it nobody, no matter whatever religion, whatever customs, managers don't need to be experts in all of those. And it's just not practical to be an expert in everything, and that's not necessary. But what can be helpful is if someone shares something with you, that one, first of all, can show trust, because people frequently are afraid to talk about too many personal details at work because they may have been burned by doing so in the past, and they may fear being looked at as the other, like different, or get comments, or even face discrimination. But so when someone shares something like that with you, if your initial inclination is you don't have to share that at work, we don't talk about those things here, then that person can immediately shut down. So even if your goal is just to get the best work out of them, people generally aren't going to be doing the best work if they feel like they have to be this shell at work. But so when people do share things like, this is my religion, these are my customs, even asking basic questions of, how do you celebrate that with your family? Or is there anything I should know? But to take that a step further is that sometimes, like, you may have situations where organizations will say, oh, we'll have the Muslim employees talk about Ramadan, or in Women's History Month, women, to plan these events. Black History Month, saying we'll have our African American employees in the U.S. talk through. when you have those people that are in that, especially, minority class, or then they feel like they have that burden. But so as a manager, something you can do to be a step forward is to even do a little bit of research, little things. Like if you look up online, how can I support Muslim colleagues during Ramadan, and thinking about that. And having some of those conversations to say, I looked up and these are ways I saw to support. Think about, as you're watching this, something that you may feel like the other at work, no matter what it is. It's where you're from, you have an accent, you have these things. And so if you've constantly felt like the other at work, if you had someone else, especially a manager, who didn't belong to that group, but they said, I took my time to just quickly look into this and see what I can do to support you. Is there anything else that you'd like me to know? Them taking some of that burden off you can be so welcome to employees. And so this is why a lot of what I talk about is, Ramadan is an example. So it's a month-long celebration. And one is at the end is Eid. So your Muslim employees may be taking time off for that celebration. It's a really huge one. But thinking overall, I can't tell you how many, even just recently, colleagues or friends I've spoken with that will talk about, well, my company scheduled this big meeting. It's over Yom Kippur, which in the Jewish religion is another holiday that's a day long of fasting. And it's a really important day. I'm having, a retreat over that. And them having to remind, this is a holiday. Or people talking about, oh, well, you don't have kids, so you need to work on Christmas. And those people, Christian employees, saying, well, I'd love to take this day off. And so Ramadan is one example, but overall, frequently this aspect of religion is one that in some organizations you need to accommodate. But from that human lens is showing those levels of basic support and getting a sense. It doesn't mean promising something if you don't know that you can deliver. So, whether it's an adjusted schedule or anything like that, but talking to the individual about anything you can do to support and having those conversations and just showing those levels of interest. That's often what inclusion is. Because again, think about the times that you may have things in your life that you're don't want to talk about at work because you're afraid of negative consequences. You're afraid to ask for a day off because you feel like someone's going to say no, or that's just going to invite more comments. But so as a manager, why it is important is to show those levels of basic respect. And for organizations, even though you don't need to be an expert on the ins and outs of every culture, is being mindful of some of those bigger holidays. So Thursday, I do a Manager Method Minute newsletter. I'll publish some of that. That's a list of some of those holidays to keep in mind as you're doing scheduling. And sometimes it's even asking, especially global colleagues, if you're in a global organization, there's different months or different times of year that other countries or may have, or cities have their own customs. So sometimes it's just asking other colleagues in those areas are, what are times of the year or holidays we should be mindful of? Because rarely is there going to be one size fits all holiday schedule. And so this week, again, posting the video about Ramadan is one, a reminder of when sometimes people will say things like, this shouldn't have any place at work. But I also have gotten many comments of thank you, because it shouldn't just be those that are part of a group that are constantly educating others. So what I try to do in my videos and in Manager 101 is talk about empathy overall, and just showing an understanding and a genuine curiosity to those whose lives are very different from yours. And that can be a level of leadership that many don't experience in their entire careers.